Should we make a start?
Let's do it, dude. Yeah.
Let's just see where it goes.
Yeah. I've been in a really good mood all day today, which is absolutely blessing. I've been busy, so happy busy, which is great.
So you're clearly happy
Okay.
to chat about your past and your ADHD and all those sort of things as part of this process.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
And in
yeah.
fact, I kind of welcome people. If it can help them, then I'm an open book.
Yeah, and that's the same. I mean, I don't. Have we spoken? I have my diagnosis as well, obviously, and I think we're both late diagnosed, aren't we?
Oh, I had one at the age of 15. So we're talking probably 95,
Oh, right.
96, something like that.
You're ahead of me then, so I'm coming to you for advice. Amazing. Let's just go for it. See what comes out of it.
Cool.
So, welcome to episode 8 of Is Anyone Even Listening to Me? Today's guest, Andy Stone. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Should we just start by introducing you through your bio, and then we can kind of introduce, let people know who you are, and then we'll just kind of get into the nitty-gritty of why we brought you on as a guest.
100%. Let's do it.
So from being suicidal, battling severe ADHD and autism, in the grip of addiction, he is now 9 years sober and holds the Guinness World Record for the most 70.3-mile triathlons completed in a year. In June 2022, he achieved 70 times 70.3 triathlons in 75 days, the equivalent of 4,921 miles, the distance of London to Beijing. And Andy isn't diving with sharks for a living. You'll find him mentoring and speaking about the 5 pillars of health and using neurodiversity to your advantage. So I think, Andy, we get straight away from that bio that you've had an interesting journey.
Yeah, it's been colourful.
It's been colourful. Colourful is a good word for it. Yeah, it's colourful. Yeah. But not a journey that we're, with the rise in the diagnosis of various neurodivergence, not a journey it's becoming more common to hear those kind of stories, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yours, I would say, though, is on the extreme end of that in terms of what you've ended up doing. Mm-hmm. And I guess one of the reasons I kind of got you on, again, it's not a podcast about ADHD, and I don't really mention my own diagnosis too often because it's not really relevant to all the guests that I have on, but this one is. So in some respects, we're kind of kindred spirits. And when I saw your bio and your website, when you popped up on LinkedIn, I felt, well, there's a guy who's kind of an extreme version of me, even. Mm-hmm. So we've got to get him on and talk about what's happened there. So we'll come to the world record later on.
Okay.
As it's a podcast about sort of education and it's about learning, let's go back to school. How was school for you?
That's a good question. So primary school was pretty much okay. I come from a pretty settled family, older brother by 18 months who is dyslexic but has no other diagnoses. And I was just a very boisterous boy. I took to sport really well. I was always kind of big for my age. So when we were scrapping in the playground, always used to be all against Stoney, and I used to win. Mum and Dad, I think, just to wear me out, got me into judo, rugby, swimming. I was swimming sort of 4 or 5 times a week from a very young age. And I'd kind of arrive after school at the local leisure centre with my little ticket, and obviously the receptionist would let me all in. I'd be there for hours. I'd just be doing different sports and then get home knackered. And I think that was an amazing outlet for me. Progressing on to high school, the sport continued, but things just started to get a little bit difficult. I was starting to struggle to behave. I was becoming kind of boisterous in the classroom. I was becoming difficult. And as a consequence of that, I spent a lot of time out in the corridor outside the staff room. And then, of course, what Mum and Dad had realised from a very young age was any kind of E-numbers, growing primitives, if they gave me any of that, I would just hit the roof and I would just be super hyper for, I don't know, an extended period of time. And so Mum and Dad did everything they could to shield me from eating that sort of stuff. And it was a very sort of whole food diet. But of course, then you start getting pocket money and you can go to the tuck shop or the local shop or whatever it is, MP mixes and then double maths. It was never going to end well. So yeah, the classroom environment then became a bit of a kind of sticking point for me. The anxiety, I had no idea what anxiety was at the time, of course, but it just became difficult and I started to get a little bit defensive. And ultimately got expelled from the comp in what was the 3rd year then. And Mum and Dad, bless them, must have saved up or remortgaged the house or something, sent me to the local grammar school, smaller classes, better opportunity, all of that. And unfortunately got expelled from there as well. This was kind of in the February of the 5th year, so GCSE year. And they kind of just said, Andy, just go. You can come back and sit your GCSEs with us, but just basically have an extended study leave, if you like. And so that was kind of school was very checkered, very difficult. And the sport was still going on in at home. Played a lot of rugby, kind of made regional level rugby by that point. So very capable physically, but just couldn't apply any kind of academia.
So do you think, because the way you've described that, it's that we see it. I'm obviously a teacher, and over my 25 years of teaching, you see and hear about a lot of kids who are basically what you've described there. And that label that you would have picked up at school, which is I'm not good at this, I'm a failure at education, is something. Changes are coming. I think changes are happening. But at the time, that label must have been quite powerful, because you used terms on your socials like there was too much going on at school, it was overwhelming, you started to act out, you became that troublemaker effectively, didn't you, that people would have kind of given up on, teachers and staff? Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly at the comp, where it was just bigger classes, 28 to 30 odd in the class. And I think it was a two-sided coin, really, because I'd started to struggle because I am diagnosed dyslexic. So I do get letters wrong. I'm terrible at spelling. If I get a 4 on countdown, I'm happy with that. So yeah, I started to really struggle. Obviously, then the comparisons come to your classmates, and with the best will in the world, trying to get that positive reinforcement from a teacher. Okay, miss, sir, I'm going to do my best today. Can I sit at the front? I know this is GCSE coursework. Can I come and sit with you and do it properly? And then for me, I'd had an ADHD diagnosis at 15, so that was private and that was happening, but nothing was ever really known about it in the sort of mid-90s. And I just couldn't stay on point in the classroom, no matter how much I wanted to. The creeping up of the cortisol and the stress and the adrenaline for being defensive and unhappy and uncertain with what was going on academically, combined with the massive peaks of dopamine and just being so hormonal. And it was almost like trying to that's the best way to word it. It's like, imagine the most boisterous kid you've ever possibly imagined, feed him some E-numbers, shake him up a little bit, and then put him in a room trying to do an English exam. And that's kind of what I had to deal with, but I had no idea. And I was just a naughty kid. Andy Stone, get out. Andy Stone, we're going to have to ask you to leave the school, and so on and so forth. So mainstream education just didn't work for me personally. And then it was kind of I was struggling at home. So at the time of my GCSEs, my mum and dad, I decided to leave home because it was too uncomfortable at home. So I was having this high stress environment all day. And then going home to tellings offs, frustration, misunderstanding from the other grown-ups in my life who loved me dearly and still do. I love the bones of my mum and dad, but they haven't been to my son's got dyslexia and ADHD school. And in fact, even if there was a class for that, which there still isn't now, by the way, I still don't know if they would have been able to have tolerated it or coped with it because of how extreme it was. It was then the end of teens and coming of age, and then that's when I discovered alcohol, weed, ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine, magic mushrooms, and all the kind of these illicit drugs came in. I was in the party scene, and I just thought it was coming of age. This is what you do when you get to 16, 17, 18, 19. This is how you live your weekends. But of course, what I was doing was discovering amazing ways to escape the situation that I was in, which was neurodivergency in a world that I had no idea about it. And drugs was just an amazing way out. And that's what I did. And it did help me to escape. And that kind of then led me to this whole new kind of direction. The rugby stopped, the drugs continued. And I don't know, I think that the job I currently have is job number 63. So I'm 43. And if a job lasts me 6 months, I'm happy with that. That'll do. It's been frustrating over the years. There's been bad exits and walking out and so on, all of that. But, I've come to kind of accept that that's how it is. So if you imagine now, for kids that are at school from the age of 4 to 18, in my situation, that's 14 years of a job they can't stand and they're crap at and their mates are good at, and they're getting bollockings from their boss, their teacher. They get bollockings at home because they're still under 18. And I think the whole elevated cortisol, well, for anybody, elevated cortisol for a prolonged period of time, that's what's very difficult in society now.
I mean, there's so many things to pick up on that, all those things you've just said there, isn't it? I mean, I'd like to go first of all straight back to the dyslexia thing, because I have been teaching 25 years now. I'm now an SEND teacher, so I teach a lot of young people, obviously, with ADHD, autism, those kinds of things. But I have realised that I am fundamentally flawed in both my knowledge and my approach to dyslexia. And I find that amazing, because at no point in my teaching career I don't feel I've had quality dyslexia teaching, training. And it's something I'm
Okay.
trying to change right now, because when you look at the statistics associated with young people with neurodivergence, it's a comorbidity, isn't it? Really regularly with ADHD and autism to have dyslexia. Yet we don't really systematically screen for it following diagnosis. And I just find that, because that's two huge barriers, isn't it, that we're trying to overcome there, and we're not doing that very well, and we really need to step up our game on that as a whole, as a society, you know, I think. And it's interesting to highlight that, but also to pick up on what you were saying about your journey through school there, with this vast amount of baggage that you were clearly carrying through school. When you're going in anxious, you're going in stressed, you're expected to be in these rooms where you're struggling with your dyslexia and your ADHD, and then also you're picking up this label of the bad lad. And I just look back through my career now, and I can see faces. I can see faces in my mind of all those young people. Who are you? And how they were let down. And it's great to see that you're coming on to talk about something so positive moving forward. But wouldn't it have been great for this to all have started earlier on? Or would it? Or would it? You know, how do you feel about that label of ADHD? I guess is the question there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of character development in those years, whether we recognise it or not. So you're right. I did play the bad lad. And I was a bit of a daredevil. And if, dare Stoney to do something, took the rubber at the teacher and all of that. And so that was my other defense, was humor. And so I became the comedian of the room. And that was, one, would help alleviate my stress. Two, would get me positive feedback from other human beings. But I don't know, it was, as I say, it was a character development that I think even now, I like to consider myself, I've got quite a good sense of humor. I can laugh at my alcoholism. I can laugh at my previous drug addiction. I can laugh at my ADHD, and I can now. But then I think the humor, it's played its role. And would I have changed that? I don't know. No, I don't think I would. I'm quite happy with who I am now, to be honest. A lot of the journey has sucked. Like the chronic crippling depression and anxiety over the sort of 20s and 30s was tough going, man. But it's made me super empathetic, and, seeing other people with similar sort of things going on, and I can help them now, and I can give them actual kind of knowledge on what these things are. My hyper focus has been learning about ADHD.
It's that thing of what you're saying about your own retrospective, isn't it, as well? You can laugh retrospectively, but had you not broken through the alcoholism and the drug use and were still in that phase now, it wouldn't be so funny, would it? And I guess you see a lot of comics, and I think it was Marcus Brigstock was talking about this on a podcast the other day, saying, there isn't a single comic on the planet who's not ADHD in his mind who can laugh about it retrospectively, because they're using it as almost like therapy, isn't it? You can laugh about it because you've got to see the funny side. What else are you going to do? So looking back retrospectively is a great thing. But are you saying you're happy to have the label now? Because often we are, aren't we? When we get it, once we've figured it out in our heads, and you see the positives and the things that have come out of it, and ultimately you're talking about your world record attempt, not even an attempt, because you obviously broke the world record. That wouldn't have happened, possibly.
Oh, there was no chance that would have come to fruition. I think if I'd have carried on down the drugs and alcohol route, I think, in all honesty, without trying to be extravagant, I think I'd be dead. I don't think I would be here anymore. There's too many people that I know who have died from this, that I was in rehab with and all of that. So, I think the diagnosis of ADHD when I was a teenager meant nothing. It was an excuse for years. We were handed a piece of paper. Yes, Andrew has ADHD and dyslexia. Right. And off you go into the world. And it's still the same now. So I had a diagnosis as an adult about 15 years ago, privately in London. And I've had a very recent 2 years ago diagnosis for autism. So it's great now, because I went into rehab as a chronic alcohol and cocaine abuser. And the first time I was able to say, my name's Andy and I'm an alcoholic, was a eureka moment. Some people don't like handles and tags and all that. For me, it was a lifesaver. And so yes, I'm Andy and I'm an alcoholic. And what do I do now? Here's a program of sobriety, Andy. Follow that and you don't need to drink again. Okay. So I did. And my hyper focus was recovery. However, I then got 3 months in and things became easier. I got 18 months in and things became easier again. I specifically remember those 2 times. However, life was still quite hard. Harder than my peers that I was in recovery with from rehab. I was still in touch now. And they were moving on with their life and getting on with it. But I was still having these massive bouts of depression and chronic fatigue, and had no idea what it was. And it's like, all of a sudden, what if this is ADHD that I've done nothing about learning about? Okay, and let's start researching that. So I did, and I then went off and started researching exactly what ADHD was. And I was the ignorant guy that, women are hormonal once a month. I was that guy. Turns out I'm one of the most hormonal people I know because of these huge swings in dopamine that ADHD is responsible for. There's two things for me with ADHD. One is the massive hormone swings. The dopamine it's the whole concept, you're so all or nothing. Yeah, here is why. Because I'm either up here 100% full of dopamine or I'm crashed. So I'm either trying to swim across the English Channel or just don't look at me for 3 days. And there's nothing in between. And so if I'm eating chocolate, I'm eating chocolate. Like, you best get at least 3 or 4 bags in with a pint of tea, or I won't eat anything sugary for a month. And so that's one element of it, is the dopamine swing. But the other one is the stress and the prolonged state of fight or flight. Not 100%, there's a tiger in the room, nothing like that. But it's like that 20% of danger scanning. Are they happy with me? Am I getting positive reinforcement? Am I not? Should I do this? Should I do that? No, I've just done that. And I don't think she's very happy with that. And that whole internal dialogue, that because of the adrenaline and the cortisol combined with the dopamine, makes it quite a roller coaster ride. And I think that's the two things for me that people with ADHD kind of need to recognize is, one, you don't need to be stressed out about it. The eradication of cortisol and adrenaline is the absolute cornerstone to wellness, as far as I'm concerned. The stress has got to go. And the implications of a reduced stress life are huge, and they are all positive. And then it's the understanding that the high dopamine state, which is a hyperactive state, which everyone kind of sees with ADHD, is great. If you can utilize that truly, it's amazing. It's Richard Branson, it's Bill Gates, it's Olympic athletes, it's amazing actors. All of these people who are at the top of their game with ADHD are utilizing their dopamine. It's the understanding of the crash. So this is where the reason why there's such high addiction with ADHD is the escapism of the dopamine deficient state, is chronic fatigue. It is zero motivation, the feeling of being lost, the feeling of chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety. All this horrible stuff comes from low dopamine. I thought it was my missus, the kids, my boss, my crap financial situation. It's all of those things. And then my dopamine kind of slowly comes back and the hormones shift and I go back into a dopamine positive state. And it wasn't my missus, it wasn't the kids, it wasn't my boss, it wasn't my finances. Actually, I'm quite happy with all of that. And it was entirely hormonal. And it's the understanding that you don't have to be stressed. You don't have to have cortisol and adrenaline because you're dopamine deficient. It just compounds the problem. So it's like another time that we are fatigued and under the weather is when we have a virus. So let's say you've got a cold virus, it's coming, it's settled in, you're going to feel crap for 3 days. You don't get stressed about it. You don't go, oh, I got a cold. Why me? Why have I got the cold? No one else has got a cold. You just don't. But when it's the dopamine deficient state and you don't understand it, why am I down? Why am I so crap? Why have I lost another job? Why am I spending loads of money? Why am I drinking? All acting out from the hormonal shift. So if you can just go, do you know what? I've got no energy. I feel like crap. I don't really want to socially interact. I'm in a dopamine deficient state here. That's what's going on. And then just don't get stressed out about it. Don't compound it with stress. And then you get through it and you're out the other side. And it's that knowledge that has been absolutely integral for me setting world records instead of being 12 pints of Stella in a horrible little pub.
There's a few things to pick up on that, really, isn't there? I mean, the dopamine, for people that don't know about ADHD, it's very dopamine based, isn't it? And I think people misunderstand, you're right, the fluctuations in that. It's the assumption that there's a constant seeking of it because you haven't got enough of it, but it can move in cycles. And I think the cortisol is really interesting because it is that sort of low level anxiety, anxious, stress sort of, isn't it? Sort of hovering in the background all the time. And I remember that from a very young age thinking, I'm not stressed here. Why do I feel stressed? Why have I got this feeling of sort of underlying free floating anxiety, for want of a better word? And obviously that understanding of those different chemicals and the influences they have is really important, isn't it? In educating young people maybe need that. You are right, and I know as part of your program, young people need that education to understand their brains and their hormones and their fluctuations and their chemicals and what's driving that. And the fact, therefore, that contributes to the fact this is not their fault. This is not something you're doing. You're not acting up. You're not playing out. It can be driven by the chemicals inside your body. I mean, we're perfectly okay talking about testosterone increasing aggression levels, that's been common knowledge for years. But this needs to become more common knowledge, doesn't it? And I think
I agree.
it's clear there when you're talking about hyperfocus a heck of a lot, aren't you? And obviously part of your wheel of ADHD is your superb hyperfocus. I very much associate with that. And I think sometimes that be a stressor for me because I'm bouncing from one hyperfocus to the next quite often. And that's quite tiring, isn't it? You know, you're lucky when you're stuck at one. You've broken a world record, but sometimes you're not, are you?
Yeah.
Give it 3 weeks, it's something really intense. You move on to the next one, you move on to the next one, you move on to the next one. And I'm guessing at some point, I've got a funny feeling this podcast will be one of those. I hope it runs its course and I don't get bored. You know, finding the right guest will definitely help that. But dopamine, talking about dopamine, you've definitely been, there's that term, isn't there? I don't know who's really coined it, that notion of dopamining, sort of almost constantly looking for that hit.
Okay.
And you kind of reflect that. I think you kind of reflect that in your careers. When I went on your, when I first bumped across you on sort of LinkedIn and went onto your website and things, he's done, as soon as I read, he'd done 70 times 70.3 mile triathlons in 70 days. I just went ADHD. There's no way that's not. And then, dives with sharks. There you go. Scroll. He's got ADHD. So you definitely sort of seeking that, and life, in a way, you look at your life as is reflected positively out of your ADHD eventually, hasn't it? Something good has come out of it in that respect. But that's not always going to be the case. But when was your kind of, I guess you kind of touched on it really, but your epiphany moment? I didn't realize you had a diagnosis so young. I thought you were an adult, late diagnosed. But your awareness that this ADHD was probably motivating your addiction and you had to step away from that addiction. You had to do something about it and make this change. When was that?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So it cost me so much, a drug and alcohol addiction. I was married to my best mate. We'd been together since I was 16. We married at 25 and we divorced when I was 34 because things had just got too difficult and because of how I was. And so I was then just drinking round the clock, sometimes at work, sometimes not. And eventually my mum and dad sat me down. They kind of said, "You need to go to rehab." To which I said, "No, I don't." Because it's the whole Amy Winehouse. They say I've got to go to rehab. Yeah. And I said, no. Everyone says no. But I went out on a 48-hour bender and kind of came out my pit and kind of went, you know what? Yeah, I do. And I went off, and it was a residential 12-step, so AA, rehab treatment center. And it was when I'd hit rock bottom. And they say everyone's rock bottom is different, and I think some people is when they stop digging, and that was the case for me. You know, I just lost so much. All I had was my car and my clothes. I'd had to rehome 2 dogs when I got divorced, and it was just the worst. But of course, my chimp was defending my addiction to the end, you know. So, well, you drink if you had my problems, and I'm just a guy in his 30s who can't get a job and blah, blah, blah. I kind of managed to flip the psychology. The whole victim mindset was what had to go. Like, I've got no missus, no kids, no mortgage, no pets. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And then a few months in, I kind of realized, well, I've got no missus, I've got no kids, I've got no mortgage, got no pets. Like, what am I going to do first? And then this whole new life just opened up to me, and off I went. So that was kind of the addiction side of things. But yeah, the ADHD epiphany came a little bit later, and it came off the back of it was the dopamine crashes. It was the why they got further apart and they got slightly shallower, but they were still happening, and it could last 2 or 3 days or 6 weeks. And what I'm able to do now, as of very recently, is recognize what was the build up to that. So the crash always comes after the high, always. And so last October, for the entire month, I just couldn't function. I didn't want to I nearly left Sally. Like, I was low, like the whole kind of trapdoor opened up, down I went, back down the rabbit hole. And it was tough. Just taken to my bed, couldn't interact with other human beings, couldn't look people in the eye. And I think that was probably the autistic side of just really wanting to just stay away from people and feeling super overstimulated at the smallest of things. And then it came back, and I was fine again. Went to November, and like, do you know what? Thank God for that. I feel all right again now. And the hormones shifted. And then it's okay, what has just happened? And it dawned on us that I tried to swim the channel halfway through September. Now, 16-degree water in Speedos for 9.5 hours takes a lot of dopamine. And so I've done all the training, done like 8, 10, 11-hour lake sessions. I've done all the cold water stuff, getting in All's water, which is horrendous, for 5 hours. So I was ready, right? And then on the day, the weather let me down and the skipper pulled me out and I wasn't able to complete. So I had the feeling of failure. and it's $4,000 to attempt the channel. Did you know? So it's a lot of money. It's a big investment, time investment, training, all that. And I didn't succeed. So there's the kind of, I understand failure. I'm at peace with failure. It's absolutely okay. But combine that with a dopamine deficit state, it took me a month, 6 months ago. So yeah, it's still going to happen. And having the knowledge of why is...
It's interesting how you talk so casually about a swim across the Atlantic, across the English Channel, which again, kind of it fits in with, doesn't it, the world record attempt, things like that. And I talk about my, I mean, I don't want to talk about it. I'm so embarrassed about my ultramarathon in some respects, because I did 2 marathons back to back and thought that was insane. 2 marathons back to back. What an achievement. What an achievement.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy's just done 70.3 triathlons, 70 days. Oh, I'm just like, it made mine look like a jog around the park.
Absolutely not. No way.
But I kind of, what I can understand from that is that I can understand the process you went through with things like swimming the channel, because I imagine something triggered that. There was an idea, you read a book, you saw a documentary, a video on YouTube, and your brain locked into it and went, I'm doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit like this podcast, I can't step away from it until I've done it. So the idea of when I just a brief talk about when I ran that event on the Humber Bridge, Hell on the Humber it's called, and you can do various distances. We signed up for 12 hours backwards and forwards. We covered basically 2 marathons in 12 hours. We covered the first one in 4 hours, which was a fairly decent time.
Yeah,
8 hours on the second one, dragging our legs across it. But that all came just from the process was just reading a book called Born to Run, and I've got a note. Chris McDougall.
Is that across the Sahara?
He's the guy who went to the that hidden tribe in the Mexican, written the name there's Tarahumra.
Okay.
They make sandals from old car tires, and they just run ultramarathons for a laugh. They decide up in the morning, I'm going to run to that mountain over there, and it's a race.
Amazing.
And he met them, and he wanted to do it. And because I'd read that book, and I said to mate, I want to do one of these. We found the cheapest one we could do, Hell on the Humber, 30 quid, as opposed to 250 quid. But there was no way I wasn't going to do that once I'd read that book and thought, can I run that far? And I used to run, but only ever 10Ks.
Uh-huh.
And even before that event, I think the first I'd ever run was 18 miles. But similar thing, your brain locks into it and you can't let it go. Is it a similar process for you? And you kind of go, that's it now. It's that hyper focus, isn't it? I'm doing this. And people are saying to you, why? I can't not.
Why not?
Why not? Why not? And I guess that in a way, that is one of the lovely things about ADHD sometimes, is you achieve things you never thought you would achieve or do because your brain pushes you down that route, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And then then once the dopamine is settled in and your chimp brain is on board and you get passionate about it, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah. So I understand the challenges of having a diagnosis, but actually, when you look at the things I've achieved, all of those things probably were driven by the diagnosis itself. And it's that harnessing the power, isn't it? Because you talk about quite a lot on your socials about the need to have knowledge of ADHD and build an understanding and know that your brain is wired differently to progress. If you can't get that, you may remain an addict, you may remain an alcoholic, you will always have these addictions. You've got to know how your brain works. You've already talked about that a little bit, haven't you, with the chemical levels, but that's obviously a really important part of your process of going when you go into schools and things and give talks is to build that knowledge. How do we do that better is the question, I guess, really, isn't it? What are we doing?
Yeah, I guess it's going to take some super dedicated Senkos, heads, deputies to sort of really get on board and understand the difference between utilising neurodiversity and battling against it, which I think most people, especially in their early teen years, high school, they're battling it. And I think a lot of it can come with maturity, to be fair, being able to see the bigger picture, taking a step back, being calm. Also comes with support and having other people help and having a team. I'm big on that. But yeah, how do we get this information into children is a very, very good question. Will it ever be in the curriculum? Don't know. Maybe. Certainly isn't looking like anytime soon, is it?
Well, maybe it kind of needs to be, at least for those who maybe have a diagnosis, but even for those who don't, to have an understanding of what's going on with their peers around them when you see these kids in the corridor.
Yeah, it's 1 in 5 people, So you're likely to. I always so kind of say that. It's like, look to the 2 people on your right, look at the 2 people on your left. Like, by the law of averages, one of you is ADHD.
Yeah.
And so.
And that's these stats. So I've been going into schools. I've set up a little consultancy with a colleague of mine, and we're going in now and we're trying to improve the education of teachers and assisting parents as well. But ultimately, I do want to work on with the kids as well. But that's what we're saying in there. I mean, look at this statistically. This is not. I don't like the word that this is a difference as such. It's just it's a type. It's easy to say it's a type of personality, but the numbers are saying that there's a reason this thing exists. Evolution has created this, and it's still here.
Mhm.
And I think we need to get with the program that it's not a minor, not abnormality, for want of a better word, statistical anomaly. You're right. There's a lot of people out there with this.
Mm-hmm.
And once we reflect on that, surely it should be easier to make change.
Yeah, I would like to think so. And you're right. It's like, even with the neurotypicals out there, the likelihood is one or two of your mates have got this. So when they start going off the rails and they do start perhaps doing too much of a substance or exhibiting too much of a particular behavior, and it does become detrimental to their health, people around them's health, then they have a handle on it and they can understand it and they can talk to them. This is where the support network comes from, is other people knowing what they're talking about when they're talking to that individual,
And I think that awareness as well, if you can increase that awareness in educators and in parents, it just creates a more positive narrative. And that's one thing we've been talking about needing, this idea that we need to be talking more positively about it. I always forget that statistic, but it's tens of thousands of negative comments and criticisms before the age of 12, isn't it? Or, that if you've got a diagnosis, it's negative, negative, negative. But we need to be focusing on what these young people can do. That requires a fundamental curriculum change. And that's a whole different podcast, isn't it? That's a whole different conversation, because you could talk about that for hours. But I certainly feel that for young people like you described, you still exist. Versions of you still exist in schools, don't they? And they need that support and that help. And we need to be thinking about that as an education system. And yes, it's hard because teachers are going to have to adapt and change the way they teach and their knowledge base. And it's going to be difficult, but it's unfair to leave it as it is, isn't it? Quite often, for young people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was kind of hope when kind of COVID struck that Boris Johnson and the bods that be recognised the dip in mental health, and there was going to be more funds coming into that, and maybe it would trickle down to an educational level. But it doesn't seem to have happened, unfortunately. It was a bit of a blip. I think the absolute fundamental part of my recovery has been education and knowing myself, because how can I expect other people to understand me when I don't understand myself? And so there's been a lot of research because of that.
And I think that needs to trickle down to young people as well, because as you would agree, anyone with a diagnosis, any two of us are different, very different. I'm very different to you. There are things that might be similar.
100%.
I don't know. Alcohol was never a big thing for me when I was younger, at that age when you got into drinking, because I was really into sport and a bit hyper-focused on being like super healthy and super fit. Alcohol was deemed for me in my head, that's not part of that sporting thing. So I'm going to, and I sort of tipped through that a little bit maybe, but I just think, young people do need that education, that understanding of how they're working and who they are as a young person with ADHD. Where do they fit on the wheel? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What do they need to work on? But it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of change to bring that forward, isn't it? I suppose really we ought to be talking about the world record attempt, because that is, like I said, when I read that, like nobody without ADHD doing that. And funnily enough, before I'd come across you on LinkedIn, I'd just finished reading Russ Cook's book about his run down the spine of Africa. And he doesn't mention it, but you're reading that going like, yeah, he probably has as well, really, because there's no way the impulsivity of like, I'm just going to load a van with 3 people and a load of batteries and food and we'll be all right. We'll just, the fact that he used Google Earth just to right, what's the quickest route north to south? That's a very sort of impulsive sort of way of doing 100%. It, isn't it? But, I mean, he's halfway up.
Sorry.
Go on. You were going to say?
No. I just wondered if you were keeping up with him going. He's now running the length of New Zealand, isn't he? Going over all the mountain ranges and what have you.
So he hasn't, unlike what I did, which is when I finished that. And again, I know it's a minor achievement compared to both of those things, but when I finished that Hell on the Humber, I hung my trainers up and didn't put them back on again for years. I've literally only just started light jogging again, thinking, can I get back into this? But it seems not. Like I'd really, really ticked that box, and I need to get back into it. What was? I mean, do you think ADHD was your trigger for the attempt to take that on? I mean, obviously you talked about in this need when you came out of addiction and therapy, wanting to take something on.
Yeah.
But that would require an awful lot of hyper focus, wouldn't it? To think you can do that. What made you think you could do it?
So there's a chap, James Lawrence. You've heard of James Lawrence?
See the Iron Cowboy?
Yes. So he did 50 full irons in 50 days in 50 states probably about 10 years ago now, maybe. Yeah. It's been a while ago. And I'd watched his documentary. And ever since then, I just love I'd never done anything like that before. I'd done a full iron in Wales, so I'd done a 140, but just the one. And just like you, I'd sold my bike immediately. I am never getting on a bike ever again. But then, time went on and that was in drinking. I was kind of drinking at that time that I did the iron. And because of the addiction, because of the lifestyle that I'd led and I'd never succeeded professionally, never earned any money. And so I still had these boxes to tick for me personally. And so I know the healthier I am as an individual, the further away I am from needing a drink, the less I need to escape my life. And so I started to push the envelope for healthy living. So I was a vegan for 12 years, but that was mostly to do with animal rights. I'm not one anymore. Personal decision. Point being, I thought that veganism was the ultimate way to eat healthily for a long time. And so I lost a load of weight, started to get in shape, and just got very inspired and very motivated. I then retrained as a scuba diver and worked in the Philippines for 18 months. I worked in the Caribbean for a few months. Fascinated by marine biology, sharks. I love that whole kind of area. There's also the concept of sensory deprivation when you're underwater as a scuba diver. Can't smell, can't taste, can't hear, restricted vision, compressed into a wetsuit. So it's like having a weighted blanket on. And it's just completely stops my internal chatter. Completely. So I implore anybody who's autistic or ADHD, the deeper I go submerged into water, it's like I become by the time I get to 30 meters, I become a black belt in meditation. And I am just the calmest man on earth. So that is a kind of very random tip for neurodivergence. So COVID was then spanners to that. I was repatriated and met a girl, settled down, and then second lockdown, I nearly relapsed. I was stuck in a house for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. Couldn't really do much in the way of exercise. Gyms are all closed, pools are closed. I didn't own a bike. I had 7 and 9-year-old boys who were Sally's too, just strangling each other because they hadn't been in school for 8 months or whatever it was at that point. And I stood up off this sofa to go and pick up a bottle of gin to relapse. And between standing up and drinking it, changed my mind. Me and Sally sat down and had a very grown-up conversation. Like, I cannot continue as we are right now. I love you. I want to be here. But something has to change. I've stagnated. And so she said, okay, well, what do you want to do? And I'd seen the Iron Cowboy, and I literally, whilst I was asleep, 70, 70, 70. So 70 half irons in 70 days. So I knew because he'd done 50 full irons in 50 days, that 70 halves in 70 days, that's got to be doable, right? So that was my logic. And then it was, like you said, the power of an idea.
You call that logic, though, but that's ADHD logic, isn't it? That's got to be doable.
Yeah,
there was no actual maths. There was no actual maths involved in that, was there? I imagine you just got like 70. It's 70 halves. Well, it's not a full, and full is less than half is less than a full, so it's got to be easier. So that'll be all right, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But that was it. The idea was conceived and that was all it took. And, the lockdowns lightened up and places started opening, started training, back in the gym, back in the pool, bought a bicycle off eBay, just an entry-level tri-bike and second-hand, and off I went. And so it was an 18-month project. We thought, okay, we better test it out a little bit. So I did 17 sprint distance triathlons, which is 17 miles in 17 days, trained for another 4 months, and then did 35 Olympic distance in 35 days. Then for a laugh, I did a half iron on day 36, just to see how that felt. And then trained all winter, and then arrived at the start line on the 4th of April. No idea if we were going to be able to achieve it or not. I'd bought another bike, so I had 2 bikes. I'd set everything up in here. Like, this was triathlon room. We brought it out of the garage and into the house, and it became very real. There was companies on board. I had an ex-England rugby player doing all my physio for free. My mum and dad, who were living in Wales at the time, rented an Airbnb for 3 months, bless them. So mum could be domestic goddess around the house for the kids, for the dog, for everything. Doing all of my cooking, I was eating for 3. And dad was roadside support. So anything that I possibly needed ever, dad was just on the end of the phone. So if anything happened with my bike, dad would bring out my other bike. He'd then take the broken bike to a local bike shop who were on board. They would do a full service, and then I'd pick that bike up the next day. So a lot of thought and effort and process planning went into it. I had a documentary team following me around that invested into it. So all of a sudden it was much bigger than me. Like, I'd kind of put this thing out there and people were like, okay, we'll be on board with this. And then money went in, and time and people's effort and professional. So yeah, just kind of arrived at the start line and just gave it my best shot. And I think the most training I'd done was a week with 2 back-to-backs in. So I did 4 70s in a week, and that was my biggest conditioning week that I did.
So were you doing the same route every day? You weren't?
Yes. So
Yeah.
we spoke to Guinness Book, and I said, if I do 70.3s in 70 days, will that be a Guinness World Record? To which they said, it will be 2. It will be most in succession and most in a year. I thought, oh, okay. So then all systems went right, most in succession. I don't give a shit about most in a year. That'll get passed anytime soon. It's the 70 in a row. That's the one. And that, got my teeth into that. That was my dopamine reward pathway. Big ass goal at the end of the fairy lights. And I was up and running.
And at that point, that would have really mattered, wouldn't it? Because what you've done at that point, and it sounds like you did, you dragged your family in, dad became support, mum was the cook, you know, and you get people in with you, don't you? They have to buy in because I'm doing this now. There's no choice involved in this. And I like the idea when you talked about the fact that if you didn't do this, you were stagnating. This need to be doing, and it can be creating, it can be sport. We tend to always have to have a project on the go, don't we?
Yes.
Of some description.
I can't not. I have to
In a way, it's almost like young people, when they get a diagnosis, need to know that. You're better off having something to do. You're better off having whatever comes into your mind. You want to do something, do it.
Yeah.
As long as it's healthy and it's good. You know,
and you know
go
what, these
with your
days,
instincts on these things.
Yeah, with the advance in social media and all that, you can get paid for so many different jobs these days. So many things. It's so much more options. But yeah, Guinness kind of gave us the criteria list, and I had to map out the route with GPS to measure what I was going to do. And then we had a chartered land surveyor come and confirm it was what I said it was. He even went and measured the local swimming pool to make sure it was 25 meters. And then I couldn't deviate from that route then. And I then had to produce from my Garmin, my Strava and Garmin on my watches. I had 2 watches in case one broke. Imagine that. One broke halfway around. So I had 2 watches, and then we had to get them eyewitnesses to sign off the document at the end of each discipline each day. So we needed 6 signatures each day. So yeah, it became very repetitive very quickly, but there was blessings to be had from that. So I knew at each point on the ride and on the run how I felt, where to hydrate, where to eat, where to have a pee. All of these things became very, very routine, which my autistic side loved. So I was very confident going into each ride and run. But it became Groundhog Day doesn't even come close. So it was just the same for 10 weeks. But I got to day 36 and I had to stop, unfortunately. We had a failure moment. I had an infection come in my foot. My feet were knackered.
I read about this, the toe, then it went septic.
Yeah. And and it became that inflamed and painful. It was bright red. The red was creeping up my leg. I've had a mate sadly pass away from sepsis, and then my PT was on his deathbed. His family said goodbye. They thought they'd lost him, and he made it through. And so I have 2 very real experiences of how severe sepsis can be. So I stopped, and I took the antibiotics, and I had 5 rest days. So I then had to sit there with failure and kind of think, well,
would this have knocked the 70 and 70 on the head? Was that the...
Yeah. Sally had emailed Guinness and said, Andy's only done 35. Does that still count in most in succession? Because we can't find anywhere else where anyone's done anywhere near that amount. Will that still be a Guinness World Record? To which they said no. It's because I'd set out to do 70 and didn't achieve that. It was seen as a failure. So I knew that at the point of having the rest days. And so it was a bitter pill to swallow. So imagine just sitting there completely physically broken, in pain, unable to carry on. Just moving my foot in the water of day 36 to swim was beyond painful. So the prospect of a half marathon was just not possible. So it's not even I could have ground it out. Or maybe I could have gone full David Goggins, but it just didn't happen. And so I took the antibiotics and I stopped. So then how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the failure? It's come from what I've learned in early alcohol recovery is acceptance and gratitude. I am an alcoholic. I did have to stop. So do I, A, stop the whole project and start again in a year's time? B, start again from day one? Do I just get this foot healed, get back on the horse and carry on, which is what I ultimately did. And so I did 2 blocks of 35 with 5 rest days in the middle because there was so much invested in it, other people's time, money, energy. And so we just got back on the horse. And so with acceptance comes gratitude. And I truly believe that you are completely accepting and you you have gratitude, self-pity can't exist. It's not physically possible. So how lucky was I that there was still a world record on the table in the form of most 70.3s in a year? So I still had that to have a go at, and that was all it took. And so I was back out and I earned that. So I had an unofficial world record of 35 in a row, which has since been beaten by an Aussie. And I now I'm still hold the current world record, Guinness World Record for most of the year, which an Italian guy tried to beat. And it looked like he'd done 71 in 65 days. But he's not appeared in the Guinness book. So if you Google it, if you go on the website, the Guinness Book website, it's still me. So I don't know why he didn't achieve it.
There must be something gone wrong there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing raises a really, really interesting question, doesn't it? Because these kind of things that we do, they're not normal.
No,
for want of a better word,
they're not healthy.
They're not healthy, are they? They're not a healthy approach to exercise effectively. And it does ask the question: what are we compensating for? What is the modern world not providing that we're having to do these things to get these hits? Why are we seeking such big achievements? Or why do we feel the need to constantly seek these achievements that are outside of what, for want of a better word, normal people might do? What is it? What is that? What is it compensating for? I mean, you may say in your case, you've substituted drugs and alcohol for sport. In this case, very extreme with the drugs and alcohol, now very extreme with the sport. And we know that ADHD can be a world of extremities, isn't it? We go for the extremes. But what is it? What's motivating it? You quoted somewhere as saying on your website, actually, if you can't do what everyone else can do what everyone else can't. And actually, we do in a world. Yeah, did you come up with that? I mean, that's kind of, in some ways, it's a solid piece of advice for young people, isn't it? Especially in a world of, like you say, you can make your living doing so many different things now. Social media's opened up a whole sort of thing. You don't have to have a normal job, those kind of things. Maybe it's easier for young people with a diagnosis of ADHD to take that pathway. And maybe that's something we should be, what is your skill? What are you good at? What are you great at? Rather than turning to the negatives, let's turn to the positives and turn that into a career. Yeah,
instead of banging your head against a wall for 44, 43 years, 44 next week, but doing things that you can't do, that society expects you to do, to keep up with your peers, to keep up with your spouse, to meet your parents of the previous generation's expectations. Stop doing that. And how about, let's try something that you're good at. And even if it's just a side hustle or a hobby to start with, just try it. And there's been precious few times in my life that I've been able to pick my hyper-focus. There's been, like I say, over 60 jobs, like this job, it's got this part, it's got this money, it's got this potential. This is going to be it. Oh, and it's just not. And so you move on to the next one, the next one, the next one. But every now and then I get to pick and the hyper-focus sticks. And if you can, as an ADHD, can achieve that and you pull it off, oh my God, neurotypicals will not come close. And I can promise you that. So all these people that, the majority, they kind of say, so what did you do? Like what 70? And so I was standing in the queue. One of the days, it was meant to be the final day, was the Stafford 70.3 Ironman event, the actual event. But because of the injury, it was day 65, I think. Yeah, must have been day 65. And I'm stood in the queue in my hat with my wetsuit next to the lake with, I don't know, 1,000 other people, however many are doing it. And over the tannoy, like no one knew who I was. And over the tannoy, the guy said, oh, and wishing Andy Stone good luck today. He's on day 65 of blah, 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 blah. And I went, that's me. And everyone turned to look at me and went, you're doing what? Like even athletes who were doing that event couldn't fathom what this neurodiverse guy was pulling off. So, but if you imagine
the effort that some of those people have put into being there for one event, it was the equivalent of what you were doing. The mindset would have been the same for them as it was for you doing 70 times 70.3, wouldn't it? To train for that. And I think,
absolutely.
I mean, it does, and it's getting that message across, isn't it? That, it's not, there are challenges and it's not difficult, but almost it can be difficult. But your journey has kind of led you to a point now with your job, if you like, now with your website and your coaching and all of those sorts of things, and coming through the triathlon, something where you seem to be in a good space and using your knowledge now to help others. And that's quite key, isn't it? Do you think we sort of have an obligation, really, as you get older, if you start to understand it, to pass that knowledge down to others, or even to adults who are getting a late diagnosis, to help in that? I mean, they turned it into a film. So I could find little clips on YouTube You're a superstar, aren't you, in that respect? You're a movie star. You've got your own film out there. What is it, 70s Substance Abuse to Superhuman?
Yeah, that's what they got with.
But I could only find little clips on YouTube, the trailer, but it got 24 awards, didn't it? Including awards at Cannes Film Festival over several years. And, it's the little laurel things with all the awards that it's got, they are big name festivals. So how did that come about then? What was the sort of the point of that, just to document the journey and...
So Sally's amazing at marketing. She's in sales. She's very, very good at what she does. And so she was promoting it. She kind of got behind it. And in all honesty, full disclosure, if it wasn't swimming, riding and running and eating, it was probably done by Sally. So I can definitely, definitely recognize the benefits of teamwork. But yeah, so Sally wrote to these people and they said, yeah, we'd love to come and film it. And so they did. We had a meeting. I told them what my background was, what I was about, all the motivations and what have you. And they were like, yeah, we would love to film that. And they did. And they kind of came and went for the whole kind of 18-month period, the whole build up. Then they sent it to all the film awards to try and get a load of accolades for it. And we're now in the position, it's a frustrating one. It's not being released yet. It has. However, myself and Sally have no rights to it. We were the kind of product, if you like. So we signed our lives away that we didn't have any rights to the final product or any of the footage at all, in fact. But the guys that created it, if you're a first-time documentary filmmaker, you can't sell directly to the broadcasting companies. So BBC, Channel 4, Amazon, whoever it may be, you need a third party. So that's where it's currently at, is it's being negotiated for sale. This third party, they just randomly, I had a French guy saying, oh, loved your documentary, really, really inspirational. What? So it's been sold in France. Okay, so we now need to get to the bottom of that. But it was just a little outlet where they tested it randomly.
Right.
So now we're waiting. There's a broadcasting company in the US who are interested. So it may be that it's first screened in the US and then it will.
But that would explain why I couldn't find a copy then. That would explain why it's not there, because there is a little clip. We'll post the link to the little clip in the bio just so people can sort of see that, because it's really nicely shot, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's that sort of strange.
The production is fantastic. Yeah, we were super, super happy with it. But it's all sealed up. Like, we don't have any access to it at all.
But it's those kind of things, isn't it? Maybe young people seeing that visually is quite an inspirational thing to see. So when it gets out there, it could be, I reckon, it'll probably blow up, won't it? With the current interest in neurodiversity and things, you would really hope that will become one of those inspirational kind of things that will be used, maybe even in schools. I mean, I guess the last thing to talk about really is your mentoring, isn't it? Your program where you've now developed an 8-step program. We may not have time to talk about all the steps. I think we talked a little bit about the importance of mentoring young people in brain function and hormones, and therefore not allocating blame around ADHD and things. And we've certainly talked about, the idea that there's susceptibility to addiction and things in there. But you have touched on a little bit, and I'm finding this more and more interesting to talk about now, this notion of sort of the importance of nutrition, exercise and sleep, looking after your body.
Yep.
I mean, you talked about when you get on the bottom of a swimming pool and you get that sense of peace. Yeah. I was finding long distance running, just the plodding of my feet, endless plodding of my feet, was doing the same thing, shutting up that chatter. Because not much shuts up. Nothing really shuts up that chatter, does it? It's a struggle. Quite difficult to shut that chatter up. So I found that, but I did many, many years ago. I did a diving course, and maybe I ought to return to diving and try that out again.
I immediately fell in love with it. Yeah, I can recommend it.
I would say over here though, so I'm not a big lad. I've not got a lot of body fat, and it was a bit chilly for me even in a dry suit. When you're at the bottom of a reservoir in Congleton staring at a plastic Fred Flintstone, it's not quite the tropics, is it? So it hasn't got that. But let's touch on that though briefly, like the importance of sort of nutrition, exercise and sleep. I mean, I definitely think exercise, massive one. And we know this. Parents who know this, works with their young people, talk about it a lot, and it clearly is linked heavily to your life. What about nutrition? Because you mentioned that way back at the start of the podcast a little bit.
Yeah, so this is a big one. It's been a real journey for me. Like I say, I was a vegan man for 12. I was a eat whatever you want for a long time. Naive guy. I was then a vegan for 12 years, which had its benefits. I lost a lot of weight. I was eating a lot of whole food. The nutrient density went up massively. And I'm now back to being a whole food omnivore. I have periods of carnivore. The reason for this is the power of sugar as an addictive substance is not to be underestimated. It is incredibly dopaminergic. So the more sugar we eat, the bigger the crash, the hormonal crash is going to be. Along with screens and all of that, the modern lifestyle, but keeping it on food. One of the reasons that ketogenic diets are having a lot of success for ADHD is So burning fat or your liver converts fat into ketones, which is the energy source, rather than running on carbohydrate. It's the benefits for ADHD are huge. There's no peaks and troughs. With glucose, you're doing this all the time. It's highs and lows, and you feel a bit shaky, then you eat some more, and then you've eaten sugar today, so now you're going to crave sugar until you fall asleep, and the dopamine crash thereafter. Whereas with fat, it's a much more consistent release of energy, and it's a lot less dopaminergic. So the crashes thereafter are much, much smaller. So I personally promote, I know it's not for everybody, but a high fat, low carbohydrate, whole food diet. And it's been revolutionary for me.
But even that aside, and if other people, that didn't suit other people, definitely the sugar, talking about the sugar, the processed foods. And it terrifies me sometimes when I look in the pack-ups of young people that I teach, and sort of though you're right, it's a big part of too many young people's diets, and the processed aspect of it, and the sugar and the highs and the lows, and that blame. Certainly when I was at school, I'm a few years older than you. I say a few, probably about 6. When I was at school, this kind of behavior was almost not this kind of behavior. The symptoms sometimes blamed on sugar. Like I always like that way because of all the sugar they eat, and there's definitely something in diet, isn't there? I mean, it's something I'm sort of looking at a little bit more, delving into. Exercise, I think, is kind of, for us, it's kind of an obvious one, isn't it? I imagine that for you is like, get that energy out, helps deal with a little bit of that hyperactivity, but also, like you said, certain sports can be almost meditative, can't they? You can get, it release of endorphins, the buzz you get afterwards, which is a positive buzz. Sleep, though, sleep's always an interesting one. People know I send emails early hours of the morning all the time because I'm off. My sleep is very erratic and out of whack, but we know that for ADHDers, sleep patterns, circadian rhythms can be 2 or 3 hours out, can't they? So often we are out of whack. But the importance of sleep, I guess, is something you would advocate as well, really, in part of your coaching.
Yeah, massively. So I do the 6 pillars of health. I've cut them into two threes. So the first session is sleep, exercise, and nutrition. And the second is circadian rhythm, community, and de-stressing. And I believe that they all play a huge role in wellness, because you can kind of talk to a variety of different people. And one of the first questions I ask them is, what is healthy living to you? And some people are pretty clued up and they can give you a pretty decent answer. And some people have absolutely no idea. With the best will in the world, and I'm not criticizing them, it's just kind of where they're at, where I find them. And no idea. And so it's great for me because I can download as much as I possibly can into them. There's a book, one of the top 3 books I've read, or listened to, I should say, is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. He's an English professor, sleep professor, works in the US now, one of the big units. It is incredible. And the more people I talk to with ADHD, I'm discovering are night owls. And the guilt that I felt for not functioning in the morning, the self-criticism, morning people who I've now christened the smug, right? Just blanket term for all of them. Well, if you just got up early, if you just set your alarm, you go to bed earlier. And like, can I stop you there? 40 years I've been aware that I hate mornings with a passion. We can be 6 a.m. or 11 a.m. I hate getting out of bed. And so to a degree, it's embracing because he talks in this book that it's genetic. 40% of the population are morning, 30 are intermediate, and 30 are evening. I'm an evening to the bone. We live in a world that's been developed for morning people, a lot of it off the back of agriculture and farming, and it's kind of spilled into modern society. So if you're neurodiverse and you're an evening person, you are already up against it. In the book, it talks about if you're an individual and you naturally get out of bed, if you're left to your own devices, you naturally wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning, me. And then someone says, you've got to get up at 6 o'clock to get to work for this particular job. That's what the job entails. Okay, so that's a 4-hour swing. Now, if you've got morning people who get out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, quite happily, ping, wide awake, off they go. This book suggests that it's the equivalent of them getting out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning to go and do their job. It's the same, but they don't get a hard time. They don't have to get up at 2 o'clock. They don't get a hard time for being crap at night after 9 p.m. Well, people like me have had this battering. So anyway, I'm getting on the soapbox there about morning people a little bit.
You're not actually. I think honestly, that resonates. That resonates so much because it's that idea, isn't it? If you can't get up in the morning, somehow that's lazy.
You are lazy, you are slovenly, you are disrespectful.
Yeah, but we're still achieving. We're just achieving later in the day.
Yep.
And I do think it's one thing in my adult life, I probably every single day of my teaching career, I've struggled to get to work, to be in the class ready and prepared and, I'm going to go for it. But I think there must be young people out there. Let's give them options. I know it's completely impractical in the current situation, but let's give them options. Some kids probably want to come in at 11 in the morning and stay till 5 at night. I'd be all right with that. These people that get up, and again, it's not a criticism, but if you can get up at 6:30 in the morning, go for a run, come back, have your breakfast, get ready for work and still make it there in time. I just go running if I go at night. I'm still as productive, sometimes more productive. That needs to be acknowledged, because how many young people are in school? Let's go back to the fact that pod's about education a little bit, and say there were young kids in school who have battled to be there. 100%. For that time in the morning.
100%.
And it's that kind of like, if you went to bed early, you'd be all right. And maybe that's not always possible.
It's absolutely not the case. And these young kids that need arguably up to 10 hours sleep a night, because sleep is so important for growth, for repair, for detoxing, for the whole hormonal reset, for building up the immune system. All of these things sleep is vital for. And so you've got a teenage lad who's 15, he's ADHD, he's an evening person, he needs 10 hours sleep. Unfortunately, his mum and dad have got jobs that require him to be in school for breakfast club. So he's got to be there for 8 o'clock. It's an hour's travel at 7 o'clock. Mum and dad probably start poking him at, 6:30, just to get this lad out of bed to school. And he's arrived at school. So imagine that in nature, you've taken an individual that should be in bed until 10 a.m., having deep REM sleep, and you're poking him and getting him to a place that he doesn't want to be. He can't perform at. He stresses him out. He has dopamine crashes because it takes that much motivation and energy to be there in the first place. And then you put a maths GCSE in front of him. And it's just that poor lad.
It's a little different for me because it's an SEND environment, but certainly young people are coming on taxis, coming on minibuses, and I know for a fact they're on that minibus before I'm out of bed some mornings, a lot of them, and they've got an hour on the bus before they've even got there because they've got up at, some of them say they're getting up at 6 to get to school for, and it starts at 8:45 to be ready, so you can imagine that process. They come in, luckily in an SEND environment, you can have that slower start today if you need it. But I think there's a conversation to be had there, definitely about sleep, isn't there? In your mentoring, you talk a lot about working to your strengths. That's something we should be promoting as well, isn't it? Let's get these guys, find out what they're good at, super talented. I have a young lad at the moment in my class who's the most phenomenal graphic artist, comic artist I've seen in a long time, and I need him to be put in front. I need him to be put in front of someone who can take that and nurture it and mentor it, because he could make a living out of it. And I think that's something that we need to do as well. Because I think
sorry.
Go on. No, you go.
I was just going to say, it's such a personal journey. And you said earlier, our brains are that complex that we are so unique. And the wheel of ADHD, the difference in executive function abilities for different individuals is massive. And we are a product of environment. And so we're all, as ADHD as anyone else, going to be good at different things: art, music, exercise. For me, it happens to be endurance running and endurance exercise. That's just what it happens to be for me. But I recognize music. I recognize the arts, languages, whatever it may be that this individual is amazing at. This is what I'm trying to give these kids, is their ability to take a step back, see the bigger picture, understands their weaknesses, and utilizing tools, coping strategies that are going to, one, get them through the day when it's going south, but two, when you become good at something, use that. Literally in my case, run with it. People say, you were running away from yourself, you were running away from your problems, you still haven't addressed anything. I was getting this from, certain individuals. But how about no, I wasn't? It was like, finally my time. It's like, you've got your degree, you've got your 50 grand job, you've got your mortgage, you've all of these wonderful things that you've worked hard for. I'm not knocking that it's not hard work. That's absolutely not what I'm doing. But you've excelled and you've done well in life. I haven't. I'm a recovered alcoholic who couldn't keep a job down, who comes from a failed marriage that was chronically depressed. I was on citalopram, Ritalin, Valium, alcohol, cocaine, you name it. I was on this cocktail of drugs, just trying to keep my shit together for 20 years. And finally, I found my thing. It's like, go, Andy, go and do that. And it's like, really? Yeah, you can spend the next 18 months of your life doing that. Go and see what you can do. And then it was all of a sudden, it's like, then, okay. And it just wallet. And I was just able to hyperfocus, hit the top. And that's what I'm trying to get through to these kids. Like, if you're good on piano, girl can play piano, and you never know where it's going to take you.
No, I am a massive advocate of this, and I think, neurodifference aside, neurotypical, whoever you are, if you've got something you can do and you can do it well and you can monetize it at some point in your life, you go for it, because I think it's a great piece of advice to give to kids. I think it's just worth finishing with just a couple of questions, which I'm going to ask because it's a great way to close. And I think you'll have some opinions on this. What is the one thing you would like to see change about the education system for neurodivergence?
I'd love to be able to see ultimately curriculum come in where these guys learn about what they've been diagnosed with or potentially will be diagnosed with. Let's tell them what it is. And rather than it's just bare bones at the moment. It's like, yeah, you've got that, off you go. That's it. It comes with a pill, a really strong stimulant pill if you want one of them. Well, we're not even going to tell you what that is. So you can have you've got a disorder that you don't know what it is, and a strong pill that we won't tell you what that is either. Let's educate them.
I mean, you are right. Only in the last year, I came across a young man who had a diagnosis of ADHD but didn't know what the letters stood for. And, or parents saying,
not unusual.
When we're going into schools and giving talks to parents, well, we got a leaflet following. So your choice seems to be medicate, don't medicate. That's your choice initially. And here's some information in the pamphlet. And if you need anything else, get online. Because the backlog, I guess, and the process that the people are going through now, it's making proper education difficult. It's great that people like you are stepping up to that then and offering that. We need more of you, don't we? Or more people going in schools and trying, with knowledge as well, with personal knowledge, to be able to say, let's go and do this because these kids need help.
Yeah.
And the second question, similar question, but what would the piece of advice you would give to a teacher or a parent who is caring for a young person with a new diagnosis?
Again, the obvious one is education, but the other one is, it's for me, trying to be dominated and being told what to do just sparks the rebel in me. And I think there is a very rebellious side in a lot of ADHD kids, particularly boys. So it's working with that individual and knowing how to kind of bring them on rather than bollocking them. And it's more carrot, less stick. But it's also things like less screens, less ultra-processed food, all this stuff that is incredibly dopaminergic. And it's just huge corporations that just want your money. They want your attention. They don't give a shit if you've got ADHD and it's causing you massive bouts of depressive state because you've got no dopamine left. They don't care about any of that. So it's for me, I've tried the stimulant medication route. It did have its benefits. I took my time with it. I got on the right dose, the right release speeds, all of that. And there were benefits, I have to say. But for me now, it's holistic. It's lifestyle choices. It's trying to live as closely as nature intended as I possibly can. But if I can sleep properly, if I can eat whole foods, if I can have a high fat diet, if I now have a red flag goes up in my head when I've watched, I don't know, half a dozen short videos on Instagram, like stop, enough, put it down, step away, let's not have a dopamine crash because you've watched too many videos. So it is, for me, if you can help these kids be educated, develop with more carrot, less stick, and just keep them away from addictive substances and behaviors as best as you possibly can, because the lifestyle choices are, as far as I'm concerned, vital. And in fact, this is where the whole kind of debate of people being diagnosed, it shouldn't be, is the diagnosis rate going up because ADHD is going up as a disorder, or is it lifestyle choices? That is a very good question, because of the power of these devices, phones. Oh my God. Fortnite as a game. You ask any parents, girls too, but especially boys, Fortnite is a masterpiece of addiction. And you will not tell me otherwise. The frame rate, the colors, the movement, how the controller feels, the vibrations in your hand when you pull the trigger, just everything about it. They have created a masterpiece that has stood the test of time. Years this game has been out and it is still the top of the pile for these kids. So just keep them off it. Do what you can.
It's a great piece of advice to end on. It's a difficult one, that, isn't it? Because I know from with parents that kids are, you're exactly right, spending far too much time on these things at night, until late at night, and then coming in next morning, having spent too late at night on them and struggling to wanting screens all the time. You are right about Fortnite, and I hear far too much about that, and your description there is amazing. I really appreciate you coming on. That's been a really great chat. I feel honestly like we've just scratched the surface. I feel like we've scratched the surface and we could have gone on for hours. And maybe in the future we'll, reconvene and see how things have
Absolutely.
changed, or what your next bonkers project is that you decided to take on to challenge the world. But yeah, amazing. Really good. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.